The scanner was designed to identify every known species in the galaxy, but when it read her DNA, it glitched, then went silent. And in that silence, every alien in the room realized humanity wasn't what they thought it was. The impossible student doctor. Varix had processed student applications for 200 years. In all that time, the bioclassification array had never failed. The device hummed quietly on his desk, a piece of Catharan technology older than most civilizations, capable of identifying any known life form in the galaxy within seconds. Today it displayed a single word that made his secondary heart skip. Error. He ran the scan again. The genetic sample belonged to applicant file MC7749, a candidate who had somehow passed every entrance examination with scores that placed her in the top 5%. Her essay on cross-species conflict resolution had impressed 3 different department heads. Her recommendation letters came from sources Varix couldn't even access with his administrative clearance. Everything about the application was exceptional, except for one problem. According to every biological database in the Celestial Academy's archives, this student didn't exist. Security Chief Talmund arrived within minutes of Varix's emergency summons. The Fracken officer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his forearms crossed in a posture that conveyed both authority and concern. His species had evolved as persistence hunters on a high-gravity world, which made him naturally intimidating even when he was trying to be helpful. Varix gestured toward the scanner with one of his thin, articulated fingers. The device continued its futile attempts to categorize the sample, cycling through taxonomic classifications like a machine having an identity crisis. Talmund leaned closer, his heat-sensing pits analyzing the display with professional interest. The sample shows carbon-based biology, Talmund said slowly, but the DNA structure is unlike anything in our records. Linear chromosomes, bilateral symmetry, internal skeleton made of calcium compounds. It's almost primitive, yet the neural complexity suggests advanced cognitive function. Varix pulled up the candidate's file on his holographic interface. According to this, she's from a planet called Earth. He attempted the pronunciation, which came out sounding like a cough. It's located in an unmapped region called the Orion Spur. No Galactic Council membership, no trade agreements, no diplomatic relations whatsoever. How did she even find out about the Academy? Talmund asked the question both of them were thinking. That's not the strangest part. Varix highlighted a section of the digital file that glowed with amber authorization codes. Her application was flagged for immediate acceptance. Someone used a priority directive seal, the kind reserved for council members and system governors. But there's no signature, no traceable authorization code, just the directive itself. The 2 administrators stared at each other in the particular way that institutional bureaucrats recognize mutual alarm. Priority directives couldn't be issued anonymously. They required biometric authentication, secondary verification, and a paper trail that could be audited by 5 different oversight committees. This file had none of that, yet it had been processed through every security checkpoint without raising a single flag, until Varix had tried to complete the routine biological scan. Where is she now? Talmund asked. According to the arrival logs, her transport docked 3 hours ago. She should be in the orientation wing, completing her facility access registration. They found Maya Chen in Orientation Room 7, sitting in a chair designed for Thracian physiology, which meant it was approximately 2 sizes too large and configured for a species with reverse-articulated legs. She had adapted by sitting cross-legged on the seat, filling out digital forms on a data tablet with focused concentration. When Varix and Talmund entered, she looked up and smiled in a way that revealed an unsettling number of flat, white teeth. "Hello," she said, her voice producing sound through simple air vibration rather than any sophisticated resonance chamber or harmonic modulation. "I'm Maya Chen. I think there might be an issue with my dormitory assignment. The atmospheric settings are configured for a methane breather, and I'm pretty sure that would kill me." Varix felt his throat sacs contract with stress. "Miss Chen, there's been an irregularity with your application. We need to ask you some questions about your authorization." "Oh," she said, setting down the tablet. "Is this about the seal thing?" "I was wondering about that. My faculty advisor back on Earth said it was unusual, but he thought it might be a processing quirk." "Your faculty advisor?" Talmund repeated carefully. "On Earth. Yes, Professor Williams at the Global Institute of Xenological Studies. Maya pulled up a file on her tablet, displaying what appeared to be official credentials from an institution none of them had ever heard of. He helped me prepare my application, said the Celestial Academy was the best place in the galaxy to study interspecies diplomacy, which is what I want to focus on. Varix exchanged glances with Talmud. How did your professor know about the Academy? Research, mostly. Maya's expression suggested she thought this was obvious. Earth has been monitoring galactic communications for about 70 years. We've been trying to figure out how to make formal contact, but our technology isn't quite there yet for long-range travel. When I saw the Academy's open application policy in the data archives, I thought, why not try? Worst case, I get rejected. Best case, I get to study at the most prestigious institution in known space. The open application policy, Varix said faintly, is intended for species within the Galactic Council network. Your planet has no official status. Maya shrugged, a gesture that involved raising and lowering her shoulders in what Varix's cultural database identified as a signal of uncertainty or dismissal. The application didn't specify that. It just said all sentient species may apply, and humans are definitely sentient. I passed all the entrance exams, submitted the required essays, and got my recommendations. I assumed if there was a problem, someone would have contacted me before I traveled 47 light-years to get here. Talmud activated his communication implant, speaking quietly to someone on the other end. Within minutes, a medical technician arrived with a portable scanning unit. Maya submitted to the examination with cheerful cooperation, apparently unconcerned that 3 Academy officials were treating her like a biological anomaly that might explode at any moment. The scans revealed data that made the medical technician's chromatophores flash with alarm. Her planet has an atmospheric oxygen content of 21%, he announced. That's barely below toxic levels for most species. The surface gravity is 0.98 standard, which explains the dense bone structure. And her world orbits a G-type star that produces radiation we classify as hazardous. Maya raised her hand slightly, as if asking permission to speak in a classroom. Earth's sun is pretty normal by our standards. We've actually evolved some decent radiation resistance. Skin pigmentation helps, and we produce this molecule called melanin that absorbs harmful wavelengths. Your species evolved on a death world, Varix said, the realization hitting him like a physical force. Is it a death world? Maya looked genuinely curious. I mean, we have weather and predators and some dangerous microorganisms, but doesn't everywhere. We've developed agriculture, cities, space travel, and a pretty complex global culture. It can't be that bad if we managed all that. Talmud pulled up a comparison chart on his command tablet. According to standard classifications, your planet would require hazard suits for 92% of known species. The atmospheric composition alone would be lethal to most council members. But you're all here in different atmospheres, right? Maya gestured around the orientation center, where environmental controls maintained dozens of different atmospheric zones. The Academy accommodates everyone. That's kind of the whole point, isn't it? Learning to coexist despite biological differences? Varix felt his perspective shifting in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. She wasn't wrong. The entire purpose of the Celestial Academy was to train diplomats, researchers, and administrators who could work across species barriers. They had students from ammonia-breathing civilizations, silicon-based life forms, and even one species that existed partially in non-Euclidean space. Why should a human be any different? Because someone had authorized her admission using channels that didn't officially exist. Because her species wasn't in any of their databases despite apparently monitoring galactic communications for decades. Because everything about her presence here suggested a level of manipulation that went far beyond a simple application error. Miss Chen, Talmud said with forced professionalism, we're going to need you to stay in temporary quarters while we investigate your authorization. For security purposes. Of course, Maya agreed easily. Should I continue with orientation activities, or is this more of a lockdown situation? Not a lockdown, Varix assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain that was true. Just a precautionary measure while we verify your credentials. After Maya was escorted to a secure residential unit, Varix and Talmud stood in the empty orientation room, processing what had just occurred. The human had been polite, cooperative, and seemingly genuine in her desire to study at the Academy. She was also a complete biological impossibility. whose presence had been orchestrated by someone powerful enough to bypass every security protocol they had. "Run a full background check on Earth," Talmud ordered into his comm unit. "I want to know everything. History, technology level, social structure, everything. And find out who issued that priority directive." Varix was already compiling data requests, sending queries to archives across the Galactic network. The scanner on his desk continued its analysis of Maya's genetic sample, still displaying that single, impossible word, undefined. Somewhere in the Academy's vast database network, algorithms began searching for answers. And in her temporary quarters, a human student from an unknown world unpacked her belongings, completely unaware that her simple desire to attend school had just triggered the biggest security investigation in the Celestial Academy's 1,000-year history. The survival test, the investigation into Maya Chen's authorization, had been running for 3 days when Director Keseth made her decision. The Academy's highest-ranking official sat behind a desk made from crystallized temporal fragments, a material that shifted colors based on probability outcomes. Right now, it was displaying a very concerning shade of amber. "We have 2 choices," Keseth announced to the assembled department heads. "We can reject this student based on irregular admission protocols and potentially violate a priority directive we cannot trace, or we can allow her to continue as a provisional student while we investigate further." Dr. Varix shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His species didn't have traditional expressions, but his bioluminescent patches were flickering with anxiety. "If we allow her to stay and she's part of some intelligence operation, we're compromising Academy security. If we reject her and the priority directive is legitimate, we could face sanctions from whoever issued it. She's been monitored continuously since arrival," Security Chief Talmud reported. "No suspicious communications, no unusual behavior. She's attended orientation sessions, introduced herself to other students, and spent most of her free time in the library reading everything she can access about galactic history. If she's a spy, she's the most obvious one I've ever seen." "What about the background investigation on Earth?" Keseth asked. Talmud activated a holographic display that showed a blue and green planet rotating slowly. "Earth is a Class 7 world by our standards. High oxygen atmosphere, significant weather systems, tectonic activity, and a remarkable diversity of predator species. The dominant sentient species, humans, evolved as persistence hunters with significant adaptability traits. They've developed atomic energy, digital computing, and preliminary space exploration technology." He pulled up another screen showing intercepted transmissions. "They've been broadcasting electromagnetic signals into space for approximately 120 years. Radio, television, digital data. They're loud, technologically curious, and apparently very eager to make contact with other species. No evidence of hostile intent beyond normal territorial conflicts within their own species." "Within their own species," one of the professors repeated. "Humans have frequent conflicts with each other," Talmud explained. "Different cultural groups, resource disputes, ideological disagreements. But they also cooperate on massive scales. They've established global communication networks, international space programs, and cross-cultural scientific collaboration. They're contradictory in almost every measurable way." Director Keseth considered this information with the deliberate patience of someone who had been making difficult decisions for 3 centuries. "Provisional enrollment," she decided finally. "Maya Chen will be allowed to continue her studies, but she must pass the standard evaluations that all first-year students undergo. If she cannot meet Academy standards, we'll have grounds for dismissal that even a priority directive cannot override." The survival test was scheduled for the end of the first week. Every incoming student had to complete it, a practical examination that placed candidates in a hostile environment simulation and evaluated their ability to survive using only basic resources. The test was designed to assess problem-solving skills, stress management, and species-specific adaptation strategies. It had a 40% failure rate. Maya stood in the preparation chamber with 19 other first-year students, each from different species and worlds. The Thessian beside her was checking sophisticated environmental sensors built into its exoskeleton. A Keltharian across the room was practicing mental exercises that would enhance its natural telepathic abilities. A Zerath was calibrating its bioelectric field generators. Maya had an emergency ration pack, a basic environmental suit, and a survival knife. That was it. Humans didn't have built-in sensors, telepathy, or energy manipulation. They had stubbornness and pattern recognition, which didn't sound particularly impressive when standing next to species that could literally sense magnetic fields or communicate through quantum entanglement. The simulation chamber activated with a low hum. Maya's vision blurred as the transport field engaged, and suddenly she was standing on a rocky plateau under a purple sky. The air was thin, breathable, but only barely. The temperature readout on her suit indicated it was hovering just above freezing. In the distance, she could see other students materializing at random locations across the simulated terrain. The mission parameters appeared in her helmet display. Survive for 72 hours. Locate and secure the extraction point. Work individually or form alliances as needed. The environment will present increasing challenges as time progresses. Maya assessed her situation with the methodical calm her survival training instructor back on Earth had drilled into her. She needed shelter, water, and a way to stay warm. The plateau offered protection from wind but no immediate resources. She would need to move to lower elevation where vegetation might provide materials for shelter. She started walking, conserving energy, breathing carefully in the thin atmosphere. Her human physiology was adapting already, her body producing more red blood cells to compensate for the reduced oxygen. It was a trait that had helped humans colonize high-altitude regions on Earth. Here, it might just keep her alive long enough to figure out her next move. 2 hours into the simulation, Maya encountered her first challenge. The terrain had shifted, revealing a deep ravine that blocked the most direct path to lower elevation. Other students were using various methods to cross. The Thracian deployed climbing equipment from its pack. The Keltharian simply levitated across using telekinetic abilities. Maya stood at the edge, studying the problem. The ravine was approximately 30 meters wide. Too far to jump, too deep to climb down and back up within a reasonable time frame. But there were rock formations on both sides, and the simulation had included plant life that looked structurally similar to vines. She spent 15 minutes testing the tensile strength of the vine-like plants, then another 20 minutes creating a basic rope by braiding multiple strands together. The Zereth student watched from across the ravine with obvious curiosity. Its species communicated through electrical pulses, but it had learned basic galactic standard language for academy purposes. "You're using primitive tool construction," it observed. "I'm using available resources," Maya corrected, tying her improvised rope around a rock formation. She tested the anchor point, then backed up for a running start. The crossing was terrifying, a swinging leap across empty space with nothing but plant fiber between her and a fatal fall. But the rope held, and she reached the other side with her heart pounding and her hands shaking from adrenaline. The Zereth tilted its head in what might have been respect or confusion. "Your species lacks natural abilities for traversal, yet you succeeded through environmental manipulation." Maya coiled up her rope, thinking it might be useful later. "That's kind of our thing. We're not the fastest or strongest, but we're really good at figuring out how to use what's around us." As the simulation progressed, the challenges intensified. Temperature dropped further. Predator simulations appeared, testing combat and evasion skills. Water sources became contaminated, requiring purification methods. Maya kept adapting, kept improvising. She built a shelter using rocks and her emergency thermal blanket. She created a water filtration system using sand, charcoal from a fire, and fabric from her ration pack. When a predator simulation attacked, she used the terrain to her advantage, leading it into a narrow passage where its size became a disadvantage. On the second day, she encountered a group of 3 students who had formed an alliance. They were struggling with a puzzle challenge, a locked container that held supplies necessary for the final phase of the test. Each lock required a different type of energy signature to open. The students could manage 2 of the 3 locks, but were stuck on the third. Maya approached cautiously. "Need help?" The group turned, regarding her with mixed expressions of desperation and hope. One of them, a Vralex with crystalline skin, gestured toward the container. "We've tried everything. Energy manipulation, telepathic probing, even brute force. Nothing works on the third lock." Maya examined the mechanism. It was elegant in its simplicity, requiring a specific frequency of mechanical vibration, something none of the other students could produce with their natural abilities. But humans had invented entire musical traditions based on creating specific frequencies through mechanical means. She pulled out her survival knife and began tapping it against the lock in a rhythmic pattern. adjusting the frequency until she found the resonance that made the mechanism respond. The lock clicked open. The relic stared at her. "How did you know to do that?" "Trial and error," Maya said with a shrug. "Plus, my species has a lot of experience with making things vibrate at specific frequencies. We call it music, but the principle is the same." The Alliance offered her a share of the supplies from the container. More importantly, they shared information about the extraction point location. Maya continued alongside them, and the group's dynamic shifted. The human couldn't match their natural abilities, but she kept finding solutions to problems they couldn't solve. When their technology failed, she improvised mechanical alternatives. When their energy reserves depleted, she showed them how to create simple tools from environmental materials. On the final day, they reached the extraction point, only to find it occupied by a hostile simulation. The scenario was designed to test diplomatic and tactical skills simultaneously. A simulated species claimed the extraction zone as sacred territory and would not allow passage without either combat or negotiation. The other students prepared for confrontation, their natural instincts leaning toward displays of strength or mental dominance. Maya stepped forward instead, using the basic diplomatic protocols she'd studied during her preparation for the academy. She approached with open hands, body language deliberately non-threatening, and waited for the simulated species to acknowledge her presence before speaking. She couldn't use telepathy to communicate emotions or energy fields to demonstrate peaceful intent. Instead, she relied on universal body language, patient waiting, and careful word choice. The conversation took hours, but eventually, the simulation accepted her negotiation. The extraction zone was shared space, not conquered territory. When the simulation ended and all students returned to the preparation chamber, the monitoring faculty was already compiling results. Maya had not been the fastest to complete the test. She hadn't used the most sophisticated technology or demonstrated any remarkable natural abilities. But she had adapted to every challenge, formed successful alliances, and completed the mission through persistent problem-solving. Director Keseth reviewed the data with particular attention to Maya's performance metrics. "The human succeeded through methods we don't typically see," she observed. "No reliance on species-specific advantages, just continuous environmental adaptation and creative thinking." Dr. Varix pulled up comparative analysis. Her heart rate remained elevated throughout most of the simulation, indicating sustained stress response, but her decision-making didn't deteriorate. If anything, she became more creative under pressure. "That's a death world adaptation," Talmud noted. "Species from high-stress environments often perform better when stakes are elevated. They evolved to think clearly during danger." Before the faculty could continue their analysis, an incoming communication interrupted the meeting. The signature was one that made even Director Keseth's temporal crystal desk shift to a deep red color. It was from the Observer Network, one of the oldest intelligence organizations in known space. The message was brief and absolutely clear. "Maya Chen's admission to the Celestial Academy has been approved under Protocol 7 of the Species Integration Initiative. Earth has been under observation for 12,000 standard cycles. Assessment indicates humanity has reached sufficient development for limited contact with galactic civilization. The Academy was selected as the optimal introduction point. Further information is classified. Adapt your protocols accordingly." The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Maya Chen wasn't a mistake or an anomaly. She was the beginning of something much larger. Humanity's first official step into the galactic community, and they'd chosen to take it through education rather than military might or economic pressure. Director Keseth closed the communication with steady hands despite the revelation. "Maya Chen will continue as a full student with complete academy privileges. Update her classification from provisional to enrolled, and someone will need to inform her that she's no longer just a graduate student. She's now humanity's first official representative to the wider galaxy." In her dormitory unit, Maya was reviewing her test performance data, making notes about what she could improve for future evaluations. She had no idea that her presence had just triggered a complete re-evaluation of how the Academy classified species, assessed potential, and understood the concept of adaptability. She was simply a student who wanted to learn, completely unaware that she had just redefined what it meant to be undefined.